Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar, official webinar on describing the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grants Program. We're going to give it a couple of minutes, let everyone in the room. I hope you all had a restful weekend. Some of you hopefully got a chance to actually not work, hopefully, and get some rest, because it's definitely been a challenging time for everybody in many different ways. So welcome to today's webinar. I'm just going to give it another minute or two. My name is Julie Baker. I am the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts, who's presenting this webinar today in conjunction with Lendistry and the Theater Producers of Southern California. We'll get into introductions in just a second. Excited you're all here today, excited to see this program launching soon, and hopefully getting dollars into the hands of those who need it in the performing arts sector. As we know, it's been a challenging several years in addition to some of the impacts of other legislation. All right, so looks like we're slowing down on folks coming in. So I'm gonna just give it 30 more seconds and then we're gonna go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to go through today. Just so you know, please introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. We do ask that you put all your questions into Q&A. If we can answer those, we will during, just as responding right there, or we'll do those live where we can as well. But we've got a lot to get through, so bear with us as we try to get through a lot of slides. These slides will also be sent to you afterwards, and they will be available on our website. So no need to take screenshots, any of that sort of stuff. You will get access to all of this information. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and move forward to the next slide. And once again, my name is Julie Baker. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm coming from the unceded land of the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan, otherwise known as Nevada City, California, about an hour outside of Sacramento. I am the proud, CEO, just my title changed, for Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. And Californians for the Arts is really, I'll start actually with California Arts Advocates as a lobbying organization. And that's where we actually fight for resources like this. We have a lobbyist employed in Sacramento, and we work to actually make sure that the arts, culture, and creative industries and workforce are represented in state government. And then Californians for the Arts is our C3 nonprofit organization. And that's where we actually try to help you to access the resources we fight so hard for on the C4 side, among other things. But that's really what the purpose of us here today. Go to the next slide. This is a quote from the president of the board for California Arts Advocates, Victoria Hamilton, and it just really talks about how important it is for collective advocacy. And that is really, these things are ongoing. We all work together to make this happen. And your voice in advocacy is so critical to ensuring that funding and resources and problems that need to be solved are being addressed by your legislature, by your state and federal government, but they really only can happen when we work together to lift our voices and to be heard. So thank you for all of you who have signed letters, sent in emails, made phone calls, showed up in public comment for a variety of things, including Senate Bill 1116, which is ongoing, and we'll hope you'll continue to add your support to that. Next slide. It's my pleasure to introduce Beatrice Casagran from Theater Producers of Southern California, who is a partner today on this presentation and to this program. Beatrice.
Hi, everybody. Coming to you from the unceded lands of the Tongva people in the San Gabriel Valley out here in Claremont. And I'm very glad that you're all here. Theater Producers of Southern California is an organization, a trade organization that represents theaters working in Southern California. We conduct union negotiations. We promote the betterment of theater through high standards, and we try and work to establish and promote the brand of Southern California theater. We also had a hand in the advocacy and legislation that helped to get this grant to be a thing. So we're very proud of that. We're currently advocating for SB 1116 through Anthony Portantino, which is seeking to set up a program that will provide small nonprofit performing arts companies with ongoing payroll funding. If you want to know more about us, please go to tipsca.org, tpsca.org, and check us out.
All right, next slide. There we go. Handing it off to Terry Ball. And Terry is our grants manager at Californians for the Arts. And Terry, take it away.
Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. We're all coming from the performing arts. And so I want to start by saying things are changing quickly. We're still getting some last minute details on the program. So let's think of this morning as the final preview before opening night. There may be some glitches along the way. We had a meeting at just 8:30 this morning and got some new details. So there may be some changes that we made to the slides afterwards. So we're going to begin today with a great deal of grace for all of us here. I want to start by making sure everybody understands the players involved in this grant. There's lots of different people involved. So the legislature passes the law. The law then puts Cal OSBA in charge of administering the grant. So they are the top state ultimate authority. Lindustry is then put in charge of actually running the grant. So from Lindustry, we have a representative today, Patrice Ross, who will be here helping to answer questions. The charming and lovely Patrice Ross that we all work very closely with, but she will be here answering questions in the Q&A as we go through. So then Lindustry reaches out to partner organizations like Californians for the Arts, like TPSCA, and you see some others listed here, who are here to help get the word out into the community, to make sure everybody eligible knows, to help answer questions. Once we move into the application phase, then Californians for the Arts partnership goes a little bit further because we're here to provide actual technical assistance. You can still reach out to the other partners and they will guide you to us, but we are the ones who can then, once you're applying and once your application has been put in and you run into any bumps, you have any questions, you're confused, we are the ones that you can reach out to. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, make sure that you get the California program website, which is on the screen right now, and I'm sure someone is going to put into the chat. Make sure that you leave with my email, which is grantsmanager at californiansforthearts.org. Once again, that will come up later in the slides, and I'm sure someone is going to put into the chat. As Julie said, I don't want you to feel like you have to memorize this. There's a tremendous amount of information, but this is available for you. There will be a recording. Also, this slide deck is going to be available. The other thing that I'll do is I'll take the Q&A as it goes, and any questions that we don't get answered today during the day, I will answer, and then a PDF of that document will also be up on the California for the Arts website. So you want the Californian for the Arts website, there's a program page that says the Nonprofit Performing Arts Organization. The Cal Nonprofits Performing Arts website is important because that's where you're actually going to go to apply. Okay, so I think we've covered all the scorecards and all the intros. Let's jump into the meat and let's go to the next slide. All right, so here's my rough plan. As I said, there's a tremendous amount of information to cover. And my personal prejudice in coming to webinars like this is when the entire time is taken up by people talking to you, reading a presentation, and we don't get to questions and answers. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to try to do is move through the slide presentation fairly rapidly. If I'm moving too rapidly, put a note in the chat and one of the panelists will try to poke me. But all of this information, because you can go back and read it, it will be there for you as a reference. So I'm not going to read every line. I want to highlight the information. I want to point you in the direction to try to set you up for success. So I think, and again, my email is there. I encourage you, please, to send me your questions, send me your concerns. If you're having the question, other people are probably also. So not only can I help you, but you're helping your other people, because we start to know what we need to get up onto FAQs and out to the community, what's holding people up. Okay, let's move to the next one. Okay, so the program overview. The purpose of the grant is to provide grants to eligible nonprofit performing arts organizations. The funds for this, the grant amounts, there's a chart. If you fall into a specific amount of your 2019 gross income, that tells you how much your grant will be, and we'll go over that in a second. The grants can be used for the expenses listed here, which are lots of employee expenses, but you'll notice number 4 is also other operating expenses. So as long as you are using it for operating expenses for your organization, then most of those things should fall into these categories. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I want to start out because I know we all come with burning questions right off the bat. So I want to start, even before we get into the meat and potatoes, with the questions we have had the most to put people's minds at ease. In addition to full 501c3 organizations, this grant opportunity is also open to fiscally sponsored organizations. You apply through a fiscal sponsor. We'll cover that more. One of the big questions on this grant is about employees, because everyone knows that it's designed as a workforce development grant, but you are not required to have employees to be eligible for this grant. You are not required to have had employees in 2019. You are not required presently to have employees to apply. It is not one of the eligibility criteria. When we get to the application phase, you will see that there are some questions about employees. Those are for information gathering only. They are not eligibility criteria. So the numerous questions that people have about employees versus independent contractors, how do you prove that you have employees? All of that, you don't have to. That is not one of the eligibility requirements. When they're talking about finances, whether it's the $2 million cap threshold or the income that you're looking for to see how much your grant is, you're always thinking about your 2019 gross income. So gross income, both your earned income and your contributions, you're going to look at that gross amount. And as I mentioned, the cap for this is your annual budget, your annual revenues have to be under $2 million to be eligible for the grant, so that you're classified as a small business. And that is for the 2019 tax year. Another common question is fiscal year versus calendar year. In this particular case, it's whatever your 2019 990 is based on. So if you're on a calendar year, then it's the calendar year. If you're on a fiscal year, then it's your fiscal year. You want to look to the 2019 that has that stamp in the corner that says 2019. Let's see. So we talked about, there's a list of the eligible expenses, but there is no set timeline like for people that went through SFOG or like with the California Arts Grant. There is no set time by which you have to have spent the money. There is also no formal budget that you have to submit for how you're going to spend the money. Remember that the state always has the option to come back and check. And so you want to keep receipts and keep clear records for how you spent this money, but you do not have to, as part of the application, say, this is, we're going to spend $100 on this and $5,000 on this. This grant, as you probably know, is going to be reviewed on a first come, first served basis. Recently somebody said to me, we should really think of that as a rolling basis, because it's not going to strictly be, these are the first 10 grants that came in, therefore they will be the first 10 grants that go out the door. Reviewing these grants is going to be a little bit different for each application. Some organizations are very clear cut. Some organizations and applications have some more complexity to them. So they are not going to wait to the end to start reviewing them, but don't expect either that if you figure out somehow that yours was the very first grant in the door, it is not necessarily going to be the very first grant out the door. The other thing, just in general, to keep in mind is this is a brand new program, which means it's brand new at every stage. And it's going to take a little bit of time to begin the process. And it is a multi-stage process that we will go over. But just because it says first come, first serve, and the applications open July 13th, nobody should be expecting to get money by July 15th. This is going to take a little bit of time to process through. Okay, next slide. All right, this is the big way that they are determining eligibility for this grant is, number one, you have to be under $2 million for your gross revenue. And they're using NAICS codes to determine eligibility. There are 4 NAICS codes that are listed here. Some of you who were on the California Venues Grant will understand this, and it may cause you to twitch a little, but it's all going to be okay. If you can go to the next slide, I want to explain. As we know, many people, many not-for-profits are not as familiar with NAICS codes because they are not actually required on the 990. The NTEE codes that the IRS assigns are what people are more commonly known in the not-for-profit world. So Lindustry and Cal OSBA have come up with a list of NTEE codes that fall under or associated with the specific NAICS codes that have the grant eligibility. When you are filling out the application, you will not be asked for your NTEE code. You will be asked for the NAICS code. So you want to go to GuideStar and look up in GuideStar what your NTEE code is, because that is the primary way that Lindustry is going to verify your NTEE code and make sure it matches back to the NAICS code that you are selecting on your application. This list here lists, if you're A20, A27, A65, you can see with some of these, you could match to different NAICS codes, but you're going to look at your NTE code. Then you're going to look at the overall NAICS code that closest matches what you are. And that's the NAICS code that you will select in your application. Do not simply select the one that seems like it's closest, because what you want to see is what is in GuideStar, because that's what Lindustry is going to use to verify things. We all know with these grant programs, there is a great deal of concern about accountability and potential fraud. So everything has to be verified in some way. And for these, they're going to look to that NTE code. If you have any questions about finding your NTE code, if you look up your NTE code in GuideStar and say, my goodness, this makes absolutely no sense, contact us and we can tell you, we can help you figure out how to fix that. Do not wait till the morning that the portal opens and you're sitting down to do your applications to figure this out. This is something you can look at beforehand, and I strongly suggest that you do. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. And this really just restates the information we just talked about. The important thing to remember is on fiscal sponsors. If you are a fiscally sponsored project, I'm going to call it, you do not apply, you have your fiscal sponsor fill out the application. As a fiscal sponsor, you can fill out an application for yourself if you qualify, and also for your fiscally sponsored projects. If you are filling out an application for a fiscally sponsored project, you yourself, as the fiscal sponsor, do not have to fall under one of these NAICS codes. You only have to fall under one of them if you want to apply for a grant yourself as the fiscal sponsor organization. Okay, moving on. Okay, the fiscal sponsorship portion of this program is even newer in concept than the program itself. It's great that we are getting some of these state funding programs expanded to include fiscal sponsors, but it's also a challenge because this is the first time for everybody that we're figuring out the details of how this works. We had a meeting just this morning clarifying some of this. So if you are applying as a fiscal sponsor or for fiscally sponsored organizations, look through the information really well, reach out with questions. I encourage you, in tomorrow's webinar, we're going to specifically focus on the fiscal sponsorship information, but it is going to be changing. As I say, this morning, we had a conversation which is going to change some of the FAQs that are already posted to the program website. So be patient, and we will get it all sorted out. Next. All right, so here's the magic numbers. You'll look your 2019, remember gross income up on the one side, and that tells you what your grant amount will be. And these grants are, it's a yes or no answer. You're either eligible and you get granted, or you're not eligible and you do. I'm going to take just a moment to mention, to answer the one question that has just come up in the chat. Actually, some not-for-profits do show a NAICS code on their 990. Some even don't even realize that's what they're doing because it's not labeled a NAICS code. But it doesn't matter. That's why you have the ability to look it up under the NTE code. And if you have any other questions, you can email me directly. But yes, they do actually. There are some not-for-profits that do, but we're very aware of that problem. We're aware that most not-for-profits don't know about the NAICS codes, and that's why we have the parallel to the NTE codes. Just, I know that's an area that has a lot of confusion, which is why I grabbed that out of the chat. So moving on. Look up again that amount prior to sitting down, because there is a place in the application where you will tell it the grant level that you're expecting. So make sure you've checked that out beforehand. If you file the 990N, sometimes referred to the 990E or postcard, that does not include revenue information, you're going to want to look to your RRF1 to establish what your income is, and also to have that ready with you at the application, since your 990 doesn't answer the necessary questions. Okay, next. Required documentation. These are the things that you want to make sure you have with you when you sit down to apply, because you're going to need to upload them. Things to pay attention to: the applicant certification. That's something you actually download and sign. You can do that beforehand. You do not need to wait till the morning of that you're applying to do that. You can sign it digitally, or you can print it out, sign it, scan it, and upload it. There's information here about how you upload documents. As we all know, anytime you're setting up a computer to accept a whole lot of documents from a whole lot of different people and systems, there are going to be confusions and problems. Expect it, take a deep breath, and we will eventually get everything uploaded and it will all be grand. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Tips for applying. Let's move on to the next slide now that we've seen these lovely people. Okay, this is just talking again about making sure that before you sit down to apply, you want to have sorted out which NAICS code you should fall under based on your NTE code. That link in the document there, because you will eventually have this document, shows you the comparison like we listed earlier of the NTE and NAICS codes. Next. Okay, there's in previous grants on this, always a lot of question about the person filling out the grant versus the signer of the grant. In not-for-profits, we're all used to the idea of like the development director or somebody completes these grants, even though at the end of the day, the executive director or board president may be the legal signer. This is not necessarily going to be the case for this grant. What you need to remember is the signer, who, as far as Lendistry is concerned, is the person filling out the grant. That's who you need the government ID for. That's who you're going to verify the image and everything for. So what you probably want to do, if in your case, the person that would be overseeing this grant and answering questions about this grant does not appear on your statement of information with the state and therefore can't be the official signer, then what you probably want to do is when you sit down to apply, you want to have two people there. You want to have the person who's going over the individual steps of the grant, and you want to have the signer there, because the ID verification is going to involve needing to see that person. So make sure you think about before the day of the grant, who's going to be the signer for this account, because your grant will not be able to be completed unless the person that you have put in as the signer is on your statement of information with the state. The other place that this is important to think about beforehand is when you set up your login for the portal, you're going to give them an email and a cell phone number. They're going to ask for a phone number. You want to make sure it's a cell phone because you have to be able to get texts, because they use it as a verification as you're logging back into the portal. Make sure that email and cell phone is readily accessible to whoever is going to oversee the grant. There are going to be questions as the grant moves through the process. They're going to send you emails. They will occasionally call you to verify things. You want that cell phone and email to be somebody that has access to the information and is there present to oversee the organization. You don't want it to be someone who doesn't have those things. Various places throughout the application, you're going to be asked to enter the preferred cell phone number. Use the same cell phone number in all of those and have it be the same one that the responsible person is going to be monitoring. Okay, moving on. That's really what I just said. This gives you the specifics on there. Certain emails that Lendistry's system sets off red flags with. So look at this, but make sure you have a strategic plan for the email and the cell phone that you use. If you have applied for grants with Lendistry before, if you applied for Lendistry grants in the past, you will need to register again, but you can use the same email you have used in the past. Next, prepare your documents. This gives you some hints on how to prepare them. Let's go on to the next slide. The important thing to keep in mind here is this is common sense. Somebody has to be able to read these documents in order to approve your grant. Make sure before you upload them that they're legible and you can read them. Use a scanner app or something. Don't take a picture with your phone. Label the documents so it's easy to tell what you're submitting. Read the instructions. Make sure you give them what they're asking for. Next. These are important information. There is detailed step-by-step instructions included in this packet on how to do these things. I'm not going to go over those, but I encourage you to look at them in detail. One of the things that tends to trip up the Lendistry system is the cookies and repetition that comes. So if you use Google Chrome, if you clear your cache, use incognito mode, and disable your pop-up blocker, your life is going to be happier. The process is much more likely to get glitchy and get confused if you don't do these things. Word to the wise, the information is here. Let's skip forward, Eddie, and I can tell you, yes, past all of that. It's great information. Read, okay, go back one. All right. So some things that you want to make sure to do before you apply. You are not going to want to be tracking down this particular information on the 13th when you sit down to apply. Know both your 2019 and 2020 total revenue as is reflected on the respective 990s, because it's going to ask you both questions as you go through the grant process. One of the reasons is because they need to verify that you're still in business. That's why they're looking at 2020. Know the grant level. Have already looked that up. Know your NAICS code. Know the email and cell phone. This is a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about. One of the other things that's going to happen as you go through the grant application is they're going to use a system called Plaid to connect to your bank account. Some banks don't use Plaid, and therefore you may not be able to connect your bank to your bank account. If you can't connect, then you are required to upload your 2 most recent bank statements. My suggestion would be go ahead and have those ready just in case. You won't know it unless if you've had a grant before and you had trouble connecting through Plaid, you're probably going to have that same trouble again. So prepare yourself. The other thing to keep in mind and prepare is, in order to go through Plaid, one of the things you need to know are the online banking credentials for your company's online banking. In many cases, the person that does the development and might be entering this grant may not have that information at their immediate disposal. So make sure you have it, because you cannot submit your grant till you at least attempt to connect through Plaid. So don't get yourself caught up without that on application morning. All right, next. So you're going to go to the Cal Nonprofits website on the 13th. It will give you a place where you can apply. Again, I'm going to go through this very quickly because we are running out of time. I want you to see what the application looks like, but I don't think we need to go piece by piece through it today. I just want to highlight a couple of things that might be confusing. One of the things to keep in mind is not only is the fiscal sponsor new, but for these grants in general, these grants that start with Cal OSBA and move to Lendistry, it's a newer process to have not-for-profits involved. Don't get confused by things that are written more for a for-profit company than a not-for-profit. You are still going to see times when it asks for the owner. Know that that's the leader of your organization. Could be the executive director, could be the board president. You can make that decision, but don't be thrown off by when it says owner and some of those sorts of things that don't refer to not-for-profits. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Again, you're going to have to sign into the portal. Keep all of this information, because even if once you complete your application, you're going to want to log back into this portal. Sometimes they might tell you to log back in and upload another document. This is also a place you can come to check your status. So that email and phone number is important to keep record of. And because you will get, every time you want to get into the portal, there's going to have to be a confirmation number sent to that cell phone you use. Next. So here you just have to decide, are you applying as a fiscal sponsor or are you applying for your own not-for-profit? Let's go on. This is some information that we've already covered. It's in here for reference, but let's go on. So we're going to go through a little bit of this application. This is the specific application for a fiscal sponsor. I'm going to use these so we cover both bases, but now it will be slightly different if you are applying for yourself. If you are applying, can you go back one? Oh, I'm sorry, go forward. My eyes are playing tricks on me. So again, it says officer's preferred phone, use the same mobile number. Don't use a bunch of different mobile numbers. Some of these things like the race, the ethnicity, these are data collecting information. The state likes to be able to know after the fact who got the money, who's applying. These are statistical things, so don't be concerned about that. One of the things to keep in mind is some of these questions do feel invasive, and we all are hypersensitive about sharing personal information and identity theft. What we have to understand is we have that concern, and the state has the concern of making sure that bad doers, fraudsters, don't get these funds. And so we have to find a place in the middle where they really need to verify things. And it means in some cases that we have to share information we might normally be uncomfortable sharing. Lindustry will work with you as best they can, but things like the social security number of the corporate officer are going to have to be shared in the application. You cannot get in ahead of time to see the application, but this guide of information that Lindustry has put together is great because it takes you through every single question, every piece of information you're going to need to know, and you can even see on the side there what it will look like. So there shouldn't be any surprises. Take the time to go through this step by step and find your questions and confusions prior to the morning when you sit down. So if this was a fiscal sponsor application, this first page is about the fiscal sponsor. Let's go to the next page. This is where you get more a combination of the fiscal sponsor and the sponsoree. If you are a fiscal sponsor and you are going through this for your sponsoree, because you will be filling it out, and you come to a piece of information that doesn't exist for your sponsoree. For example, here, they're asking for an EIN number. If you don't have it for the sponsoree, fill in your number for the fiscal sponsor, because there are some things that they're asking for, but that may not actually apply for all fiscal sponsorees. As I said, we're still working this portion out. One thing to remember is just like the organizations, one of the criteria we haven't talked about yet that I didn't mention out loud is that in order to be eligible, your organization has to have been in existence prior to June 1st of 2019. For fiscal sponsors, the fiscal sponsorship relationship, the agreement between the fiscal sponsor and the sponsoree has to have been in existence since June 1st, 2019. You are required to have a written fiscal sponsorship agreement between the two entities. You will be required to upload it in this process, and it needs to have been in existence since June 1st of 2019. For example, this is one of the questions here. Are you a not-for-profit or a for-profit business? Smile to yourself, answer it, and move on. Obviously, everyone here will be answering nonprofit because that's the only thing that's eligible for this grant. Okay, next page. These are questions that are, again, as we mentioned before, the questions that are highlighted in yellow, these are for data collection only. You can answer 0 if you do not have employees and you are still eligible. You are not required to have employees to be eligible for this grant. As I mentioned before, here's where you need to fill in both the 2019 and 2020 numbers. The 2020 numbers are not being used to determine eligibility. That's part of what they're doing to determine that you're still in business. They obviously don't want to give grants to organizations that are no longer operating. Okay, next. So now you're going to start answering questions about the sponsoree. Again, if your sponsee does not have a NAICS or NTEE code, which they probably are not going to, for now, fill in your code. This is one of the areas where we're waiting for a final determination from Linda Street and Cal OSBA as to how they're going to verify this for the sponsees who do not yet have a number such as this assigned. The important thing is, as you're going through the application, you've got to fill something in all the required fields, or you're not going to be able to complete the application. All the rest of this, women-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned, in your mind, substitute led for owned. And you can determine whether by women-led you mean your board, your senior staff. That's a decision you can make within yourself. These are not qualifying factors. These are being collected for data information only. Okay, let's go to the next one. These are, again, how many months was the sponsee in operation in 2020? They're just, again, trying to establish that you're still a functioning organization. Just because you weren't presenting performances does not mean you were not in operation. Okay, let's move forward. All right, this is one of the areas that's going to cause people concern. The nice thing is this process used to happen in previous grant programs after you completed the application, so it was even stranger that they were suddenly asking you to have your face identified. It's now part of the application. The first thing you're going to do is upload the front and back of government ID for the signer, not for the person who might be overseeing the grant, but for the signer of the grant. Then the application is going to ask you to have that person go back for a second. Look into the camera on the computer, and they're going to verify that the face they're looking at is the same face on the ID that you've uploaded. And what it's going to do is have you look and turn your face to one side and turn your face to the other side. We're not going to do that right now because none of you need to see the camera trying to figure out if my face is really my face. But no, it's coming. This is why I suggested that if you've got one person overseeing that has the information and someone else that's going to be the signer because they're on the statement of information, you want both of those people physically there at the computer. You cannot submit your grant an application until you complete this process. There's a way when you're doing it to potentially use your cell phone instead of your camera phone. That seems to work better for some people. It's a persnickety little thing, but you just have patience, keep working at it, and it will eventually see your face. Okay, now we're going to the next one. The other thing, as I mentioned before, that you're going to do as part of the process is verify your bank. I'm not going to go through all of this, but as I mentioned, be sure you have those, be sure you know the bank account, be sure you know which bank account you want to use, and have your the login information for the online access, because that's what they're going to want. Okay, so let's move on. Uploading the documents. There's a list there. Some are required. Some will say, if you're going to do this, then you need to upload this document. If you have a huge problem the day that you're trying to apply and you can't get a document to upload for some reason, or if there's something strange about your document that you think needs to be included, put a note into the PDF to explain that. If there's a document that you don't think is required, but it won't let you progress, put in a note. You know, write a note in the PDF and put it in there. One of the things that I will draw specific attention to here is there is an agreement STD 213 that is referred to in some of the information about fiscal sponsors. You do not need to worry about that agreement at this time. That does not need to be signed and included here. All of the information in the FAQs and the website will be updated, but it is on the fiscal sponsor application. It's going to ask for that agreement. Make a Word document that says, we don't have this agreement. We understand we don't have to upload this, and upload that document. They will not be able to fix the portal to not require you to upload that document.
Terry, it's a 13-minute time check I want to give you, and I want to move past the fiscal sponsor stuff if you can.
Yes, that's what yes. So all of the application as a regular applicant is the exact same. It just won't be divided into two. So what I was going to say is let's jump to the end just so that we show the contact information. And then let's hit questions, because the applying for your not-for-profit slides are the exact same as everything we just went through. And I'd much rather jump into the questions.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Awesome job. And a lot of the questions have been answered as we've been going, thanks to both relationship managers, our partners at Theater Producers, Southern California, and our team. But I wanted to just lift up a couple of things around the 2019 990 and to clarify, because I believe this was the case, right? It is what is listed as 2019, even if it means that some of your 2019 is part of your 2020. It's still going to say 29. It's what's listed on your 990 is 2019 at the top, correct?
Exactly. So it doesn't matter what your fiscal day, and it doesn't matter that the actual physical dates you're giving are different than somebody else, because this isn't about COVID. It's your fiscal year.
Right. And as long as you're under $2 million in that fiscal year.
Yes, in 2019. If today you are above, if you were under it in 2019, that is what is important.
And it's 2019 fiscal year, not just the calendar year, just right. So everyone's really, really clear.
Yeah, you want to go to that 990 that the IRS stamps on the form, not the dates that you fill in, but the form, the number up in the corner.
So there's a couple of questions around the statement of information, who signs it, someone mentioned a grant writer, and then does the grant, so can you just kind of go through that a little bit one more time to really be as clear as possible? Thank you.
Absolutely. Every not-for-profit has filed with the state of California a statement of information. You can look it up online and see who is on. The officers of the organization who are legal signers for the not-for-profit are listed on that statement of information. It is very unlikely that your grant writer, development director, are on that statement of information. It is primarily the board president and some board officers. Depending upon your organization, the executive director may or may not be on that. This grant has to be signed by a person who is listed on the statement of information as a signer for the organization. Tracy has wonderfully popped into the chat where you can look your statement of information up. Again, this is stuff you can do beforehand. Go today and look up your statement of information. And when you are deciding who the signer is going to be, just make sure they're listed there. And then that should be the person who sits with you. You know, you may have a staff person who's actually filling out the information, but the one who's going to play with the persona and be the signer is someone who's on that statement of information. Does that make sense, Julie?
Yep.
Okay.
I think so. We'll see if there's other questions around that. There's some questions around the RRF. That's your registry for with the Department of Charitable. It's Rob Bonta, so it's the Attorney General's office, Department of Justice, and it is your registry of the charity renewals that you are registered 501c3 essentially.
And while we're mentioning that, just as a precaution, prior to applying to the grant, go into the Registry for Charitable of Trusts and double check your status. We found on the California venues that there are people who, because communication is sometimes very slow out of that office, sometimes have delinquencies on their status that they are not aware of. You do not have to submit the RRF unless you don't do a 990 that includes your income. But regardless, go into the Registry for Charitable Trust. There's a way to look up your status and just look, because there have been more than a few organizations who discovered they had a delinquency with the Attorney General's office that they were not aware of, and it is not a quick process to get cleaned up. So,
and you can do your RRF separately from filing taxes. So that can be looked up and sent in. It doesn't have to go with your taxes. So Cheryl, you asked that question. So I agree that with Terry, look that up. You should, that's important for California Arts Council grants. Any of this, you all have to be current with your paperwork with the state in order to access any state funding. So that's what that is.
And don't just assume that you are up to date because you haven't heard anything. Their communication can be a little sketchy. And I have worked with multiple people who were certain they were fine and then discovered they had a delinquency. So
Terry, we're getting lots and lots of questions about people not being able to be in the same room or the signer having being out of state.
Email me directly. That is going to be a problem. What you are unfortunately then going to probably have to do is move to a certain point in the application, log out, and then have the signer log back in. But there will not be a way around, or perhaps there's another signer on the statement of information you could use. But you will absolutely have to have a signer who can sit in front of a computer and verify through persona. So if you are one of those people that is very concerned about, send me an email directly, because that's the kind of thing that's going to be more productive to go through on a case-by-case basis. What else are our big questions?
So maybe someone on our team can look up an example of what a statement of info looks like. I'm sure someone could Google that real quick. What if it isn't possible for the grant writer and signer to be in the same room? So I think you just answered that, log in, log out. Yeah, but always logging in with all the same info. You can't, there's no way to do it other than that, right, Terry?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, you will have to have the same, which means you're going to have to be in communication with the signer when they log in, because when they go to log in, you're going to get a text and a code is going to have to be entered in order to log in. Somebody just asked when the grant portal, it opens on July 13th. What else?
What time?
At 9 a.m. 9 a.m.
Yes.
That's as far as we know right now. Yes.
Yeah. Let's check in one of the uploads, the recommendation.
a lot about the statement of information. So, and who's signer on it. And
Usually
can
it
that
is
be
the
amended?
officers. In most case, it's your board officers. Usually it's your board president, your vice president, secretary, and sometimes treasurer. Whether the executive director is a signer or not varies from organization to organization, because some people have their executive director on their board and some do not. So it has to be a board officer. I can almost guarantee you it will not be your grant writer. It will not be your development director.
Right.
Of a staff person, the only person that it's likely to be would be an executive director, possibly an artistic director. But it's very easy to get a copy of it from the state.
So Stella says our 2019 fiscal year says July 2018 to June 2019, but the top right-hand corner says 2018. Will that confuse folks? That's actually your 2018 taxes.
Yes.
You need to go to the next year's taxes, which is your 2019. That's what you want to upload. So make sure it says 2019 top right.
People get confused because there's a space sort of under your address and everything where you fill in the dates of your fiscal year. That's not what we're talking about. The form itself has a date up in the upper right-hand corner. What else?
It says, can the signer and the application submitter both log into the application at the same time from different locations, or should the application prepare a log out when the authorized signer logs on to do the ID verification, and then the other persons may be available by phone to forward the text message with the access code?
You cannot have two people logged into the application at the same time. So you will have to do it where you log out, they log in and do that portion, save, log back out, and then you log in to finish the rest of the application. One other thing on that, there is a point before you submit the application where you can go back and review everything. Do it. You can go back in and edit what you've already filled out. Once you hit submit, it becomes more complicated to update and change things. You can do it. You just have to first contact Lindustry and ask them to reopen the portal for you. So it's a more convoluted thing. So take a minute, take a breath, look over everything, make sure that you've answered everything the way that you want to before you press submit.
And to clarify right now, Terry, I don't believe 2020 990 is required. Is that correct? It's just
That
the
is,
2019.
yes. No.
Yeah. So
They may ask it for it after the fact for some reason, but no. The thing that's confusing is you need to know your 2020 annual revenue. That's
right.
Gross revenue, but you do, which will come off of your 2020 taxes.
Or not. It could just be coming out of your own QuickBooks.
Right.
P&L balance, whatever. So you can, it doesn't have, what they're saying is you don't have to back it up with the 2020 taxes, because some people haven't filed those.
Right, right.
There was a question, what is the time period? Does proposal process include a timeline, proposed activities, evaluation, et cetera? And no, it's not a grant like that. It's not like your typical not arts grant. It's really more based on financial need. Do you meet these eligibility requirements? And there's no narrative, there's no timeline, there's no even budget. So everything that we went through, it shows you that. The first come, first serve means that does that mean that all qualifying applicants will receive funding? As long as the money doesn't run out. There's $49.5 million in this funding pot. So, we encourage you to, of course, apply. The number one point is that you must apply in order for you to be eligible at all for this grant. Do not self-select out. I mean, if you're a trucking company, no, you're not a performing arts organization. We saw that question. But if you think you're a performing arts organization and you meet these eligibility requirements, you're a 501c3 with a budget under $2 million, or you're a fiscally sponsored organization with a budget under, that sort of thing, apply and do as much as you can before July 13th. That's why we're doing these webinars right now. Study this information that Terry has really spent a lot of time preparing for you in this deck. And then if you have specific questions, please reach out to her directly, grants manager at californiansforthearts.org. It's 11 o'clock now. I have to run. I don't know, Terry, if you can stay on a little bit.
I can stay on for a few. And there's a couple of questions here that I want to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I can stay. So if
Right.
people want to hang
right.
out for a little bit, we can keep doing this.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks Terry for all your hard work on this. Thanks to our partners and thanks to the state for making these funds available for nonprofit performing arts organizations with budgets under $2 million. All right. I'll see you guys later.
Okay, I'm going to hit a couple of things that are over in the chat. We don't know when exactly the funds will come out. I would suspect, life being what it is, that it will be probably 2 to 3 weeks at least before the first grants go out, because there are a number of things that have to be verified. There's that information on the slide deck. We didn't get to it because I wanted to make sure we have questions, but it's going to take a little bit of time. And it can, even once you get to the point where you're granted, it can take 5 to 10 business days before you get your funds. So don't start setting your hearts on, I'm going to get this and I'm going to have the money on July 20th. Know that these things are going to take a little bit of time. There was another question over here right before that. Oh, somebody mentioned that GuideStar is free and you can look up your past 990s and your NTEE information. It is also true that you can have up to 3 NTEE codes listed in GuideStar. You do not have to have only the one, but it's a good thing to go and look at because many organizations look to GuideStar. So go look up your listing, make sure everything is accurate. The person, I want to clarify, if we get stuck on one of the uploads, the recommendation is that we create a PDF with a note describing the situation and upload that. Yes, that is the recommendation. Because you will not, if the document is required, you will not be able to submit if there's not something there. Communicate. Just put, create a note that explains what's happening, and upload that so you can at least get it in, and then they will contact you afterwards and say, okay, we need this. Obviously, they will not be able to complete your review without the information. But yes, if for some reason it hates your 990 and you just can't get it to upload, put in a note, explain, upload the note. All of the documents have to be in PDFs. There is a page in the presentation that gives you the specifics. I think it's 15 megabytes, and there's certain characters that you can't have in. On the statement of information, the agent for service of process is not a signer. No, it has to be one of the listed officers. Does anybody see any other questions we have not gotten to yet? I couldn't see anywhere how much will be given out per organization. There is a chart on page, it's on the program website. There's also a chart in this document on page 13. There are 3 different levels of grants, and the level that you would be eligible for is based on your 2019 gross revenue as shown on your 990. So if you are between $1,000 up to $100,000, your grant, if granted, would be $25,000. From 100,001 to $1 million, it's $50,000. From $1,001 up to $2 million, it is a $75,000 grant. They will not be given out in portions. It is an all or nothing. These grants, if you applied for if you got the California Relief Grant, if you got the Cal Venues Grant, those have no bearing on this grant. Having gotten them does not guarantee that you would qualify here. Having not gotten them, not applied, they're totally unrelated. And they will not be deleted from this. Like if you applied for a California Venues Grant, then the California Relief Grant was taken out of that grant amount. That is not the case here. This is a general operating grant. Can funds be rent? This technically is a workforce development grant. There is a list of things that you can spend the money on. One of the items there does say general operating funds. So it does, yes, you can spend money on things like rent and supplies, etc. Brianna.
Terry, are you also checking the Q&A?
yes and no, but if they're, I'm scrolling things through quickly.
Yeah.
If our NTA NAICS code doesn't match, should we opt out or contact you? Contact me. Email me if your NTA NAICS code is not on this list, and let's talk about your situation. Confirming, Beatrice said on our statement of information, if my name is listed as agent for service or process, I can be a signer. I don't believe simply being the agent for services of process makes you a signer. I will clarify that and email me and I'll get you a hard answer on that. Can you repeat that about Cal Venues and Cal Relief Grant? The two programs, the three programs are completely unrelated. So if you got a California Relief Grant or a California Venues Grant, that does not prevent you from being eligible for this grant. It doesn't determine eligibility. Like if you don't say to yourself, well, I got a Cal Relief Grant, so therefore I'll definitely qualify for this. That's not the case. But there is no prohibition on you getting both grants, all three grants. And there is no requirement on this grant that the previous grants be deleted from your grant amount. These are totally separate. This is in fact not a COVID relief grant. This is a workforce development grant. If we have 3 NTE codes listed, but only one is eligible, that's fine. Yes, all of the NTE codes that you have listed in GuideStar don't have to be part of the eligible NTE codes. You just have to have at least one eligible. They will be looking at the Department of Justice status and the Secretary of State status. I believe so. I will clarify that though, Cheryl. That is an excellent question. But I would suspect that they will be checking both. Confirming that, yes, we've got that one. Statement of interest. It's not the agent on the statement of information, it's the signers.
Officers.
Officers, sorry, yes, the officer, it has to be an officer in order to be a signer. Thank you. It'd be great to share the recording. Yes, the recording for this web, now it's going to take a little bit of time because we have to upload things, but on the Cal Nonprofits website, you will be able eventually to find the recording of this webinar, the slide deck used in this webinar, and I will go through the Q&A and the chat and pull out the questions and answers, and that will be posted on the Californians for the Arts website.
Yeah, Terry, I just wanted to clarify. You said Cal Nonprofits website, but you meant Californians for the Arts.
Thank you, Martha. Somebody better keep me honest here. Yes, Cal Nonprofits. I mean, Californians for the Arts. Good Lord, we have too many California words here. All right, taking a deep breath. So yes, it will be on the Californians for the Arts website. If you look under programs, there is a tab that says Nonprofit Performing Arts Organization Grant. And that's where the information will be. Is there anything else? I see that there are about still 20 people hanging out. Are there any other questions?
We can also follow up and email everybody that registered with the materials, with the link to the forwarding in the back as well.
Do the officers need to be listed with the California Secretary of State? Yes, I think as part of your not-for-profit requirements, you have to have an annual statement of information, and it has to list at least one board officer on your statement of information. If there's anything in the chat or questions that you're still on and you're saying, why haven't you answered my question? Can you just stick it in again right now so we get it without going through everything? I don't want to miss anybody's question just because we have not scrolled. You have to go through one of the partners. No, you don't have the information on is a little bit confusing. You do not have to actually apply through a specific partner. It will ask you which partner you worked with, and you can select whichever one. But again, it's not, it's information gathering. It's not pertinent to eligibility, and you do not somehow have to contact them to go through. The only way you start the application is to go to the program website, and that's how you start and apply. Please explain a little bit more about what you need RRF. Okay, the only time you're going to be required to upload the RRF as part of the application is if you are a very small organization, and therefore the 990 that you file is the 990 in postcard, because the postcard doesn't actually include your revenue and expenses for the year. The rest of the 990s do. So if you file that 990 in postcard, then have your RRF form ready to upload, because for you, that's what they're going to use to verify your finances, because they're not on your 990. So hopefully that answers that question. When is the link to begin the application? It's on the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant website. Is there any way to get in touch with someone from the Department of Justice about the delinquency? Okay, so Patrice is trying to answer Cheryl's question. Cheryl, who is living in Secretary of State delinquency hell. We are delinquent in the due to complete filing with it, which we are fixing. Martha, you can go ahead and apply for the grant. You will not be granted the grant until you get that cleaned up so that they can look it up online and verify that you are up to date in compliance. So don't not apply because of this, but no, do everything you possibly can to get that cleared up as soon as possible, because they will not be able to complete your grant and grant your grant until you have that cleaned up. And as Cheryl is mentioning, dealing with this portion of the state is unbelievably slow. They are very, very behind. When you send communication to them, they send you back an email that says it will be 30 to 60 to 90 days before they communicate back with you. So do everything you can, call your congressman, do everything you possibly can to try to get that delinquency cleared up, because that is one I have not seen a workaround for. It's not like you can get somebody to state charity number. How do I find this? Send me an email, anonymous person, and I can point you in the right direction. Anything else? These are all fabulous questions. All right. Going once. I wish I could tell you, Cheryl. I don't know whether flying there and walking in the door will help or not. I will, and I wish I could say, you know, I'll ask. I don't even know who to ask, but I will keep looking also, because I know you're in complete hell. The only other thing I can say, Melissa, I believe it cannot just be the agent who is eligible to be subpoenaed, basically. I think it has to be an officer, but I will clarify that, and we will get that answer with the rest of the Q&As posted on the website. I would assume it has to be one of the officers for now, but I will. It is now my mission to find out that specific piece of information. Anything else? If you take nothing else, take those websites, take my email. Remember, we are here through the process. This is a process that involves lots of people. There will be glitches. If you're concerned, if you're having trouble, if you have questions, email me. That's what we're here for. Also, for those of you who applied to the California Venues Grant, the new legislation fixing that up has been passed. We are waiting now to find out what the process will be to update. So if you're still sitting on one of those grants, send me an email, particularly if you're a not-for-profit, because there may be something you can do in the interim. But if you still have one of those grants and you're waiting on that, send me an email. Thank you for all of the kind words. I appreciate you coming. I'm excited to hopefully help all of you complete this process and get grants. Go out into the world and have wonderful days. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Bye now.